Hi folks, thank you guys so much for coming. If you're looking for the Princeton Review medical admissions timeline for the 2022-2023 cycle, you're at the right place. And I just wanted to welcome you to today's presentation. We are going to get started because there is so much information to cover. And out the gate, I want to talk to you guys about my whole purpose in this. I am actually the director of medical admissions counseling here at the Princeton Review. So I've been doing this forever, and I'm going to show you that in a second. But really, my goal today is to really help sort of demystify the whole process you're getting ready to go into, give you tips to, I'm going to be quite honest with you, to help you not make the same mistakes I did. So when I'm talking to you about things you should do, what we face, I sit on 5 medical admissions committees right now, and I will tell you the topics of conversation in terms of the mistakes we see. And I will tell you, I look back now and I think, yeah, that was me, that was me, that was me. So when I'm telling you things, it's not to be condescending, it's trying to help you not make those same mistakes. So let's first get through a little bit about what we're going to be doing today. And let me minimize this up here and I'll come back to it. So this is me. All right, we won't dwell on this a whole long time, but my name's Dr. Anita Paschall. I'm actually an MD PhD. Guys, I am a dinosaur. I am almost 58 years old. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I've done it on all levels. I've been that medical school applicant, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and oh so stupid. I have been that advisor at the collegiate level. I have led admissions committees. I have worked in the field. I've worked for WHO, USAID in private practice, as well as basically helping run AdCom committees. And so I get the background of where we are. And I've been just like you guys. I've been that excited. I want to be a physician. But the key thing is helping you figure out how you articulate that. So anyway, I have an MD from UNC Chapel Hill. My background's reproductive health, family planning, family medicine. I have a master's in education, and my PhDs are in physiology and pharmacology. Please don't be impressed. I want to get a job. And I have worked in all areas of research, but the biggest thing is that connection to the admissions committees and sort of what we're looking for on this side. So I want to share a little bit of that with you guys. So what we're going to talk about is the landscape, sort of what you're up against and how to best craft yourself. And that is the key thing. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the numbers. And when I talk about the numbers, hopefully that will help you understand that it's not just about hitting the checklist, but more importantly about figuring out who you are and then how you articulate that to catch our attention and why so many people sort of fall through the cracks, so to speak. So before I get started with that, so I have a better idea of who I'm working with because I know a lot of my students the students I'm currently working with were coming to this webinar, but I'm trying to get a better idea of kind of who my audience is out there. So I want to do a quick poll. So I want to ask if you've already applied and you're in the application cycle right now, maybe you're thinking about, oh crap, what if I have to reapply? Or you're going to be applying this upcoming cycle, which means you guys are going to be applying in May or June, or if you're trying to get a jump on things, which is awesome, and you're going to be applying in the future. So if you could just let me know. So it looks like right now we are pretty much a split all the way across the board. So there are a few of you guys who have already applied, kind of worried about, oh my goodness, am I going to need to reapply? And then the gist of you guys are either getting ready to apply this upcoming cycle, or those folks I love to get who are going to apply in the next year or so, and you want to make sure you've got everything you need. So awesome, great mix. I'm going to cover all of that. Okay, so let's get past this poll and move on. What does it take to get into med school? So let's go through the basic numbers first. And this is the biggest thing. When I start working with students, the first thing is it's often hard for them to really get a grasp of like what they're up against. And so on an average year, we see anywhere from about 52,000 up to 57,000 applicants. And that's about what we've seen over the past 8 to 10 years. Last year, that averaged out to about 16 applications per person, meaning they submitted to schools. And honestly, that's true. If you look at the numbers, the average number of schools applied to by AAMC applicants was about 7 to 15. Most of the students I work with apply to about 20. And if you're also doing DO, it's generally around 25 to 27. But if you figure that out based on the number of med schools, that's about 850,000 applications going out to different schools. The average school, and this is the first thing to think about, the average med school is going to get about 10,000 applications. So if you're thinking about a med school has roughly about 100 seats, and we're going to interview about 300 to 500 people for those 100 seats. We've got to whittle that down from the 10,000 applications we get. And I will tell you that 3 of the schools I work with actually got between 13 and 17,000 applications last year. So that's the first thing. My students come to me all the time and they're like, oh my goodness, I got a C in this class. Oh, I'm only taking 12 hours this semester. Oh, I've only done this. Guys, we've got 10,000 applications to get through, which means we're not sitting there intrinsically poring over every detail in your application. We're looking at the numbers and the data and the things that are going to catch our attention. And I'm really hoping to help you guys understand how you create your brand, but also present it so that those numbers come through to a med school. So of those 53,000 plus applicants, we're going to end up with, and last year we actually took more students. So it's any given year, so around 21,000, but we opened a couple of new med schools. So we had 22,000, a little over 22,000 people matriculate in 2021 to med school. That's about 42% of applicants, and that was actually high. A huge part of that was due to COVID because we had a lot of people who initially applied, but then withdrew their applications due to COVID. We are already seeing a definite uptick in those numbers this year. So I expect that number of matriculates probably to drop back to sort of where we have traditionally been, around 40 to 41%. But that's what I really want you guys to think about. So if everybody's applying and we've got 40% of people accepted, that means 60% are going to get denied. And this is like a daunting fact for a lot of students that I work with, because most pre-med students, just like I was, we're ambitious overachievers. We are, as I always described them, hamsters on a treadmill. You're trying to get everything you need, and to everybody else in the world, you are oh so impressive. Look at that beautiful 3.5 GPA. Look at all those things you do. But the problem is, that's what every other med student is doing. So when you come up against 10,000 other applicants and there are only so many seats, you've got to have ways to create your brand, distinguish yourself, and be able to articulate it. Now, that doesn't mean you're not supposed to get all these things that you need in your arsenal, but it also means how unique those are and what you get out of that. And that is the most important thing. Here at the Princeton Review, we actually do something called a rejection review. And last year, of the rejected applicants that I reviewed through that process, I did not have a single applicant with an Mcat score below 518 and a GPA below 3.8. And you're like, holy crap, wait, that's like amazing. Why did they not get in? And the reasons come down to timing, articulation, and the other things that you have in your application. Those are the things I'm going to cover. Those are the things I want you to think about and how that fits into creating your brand. Here's the other really scary thing though. Of that 60% who are denied, 50% of those kids had a great GPA and a great MCAT, just like the people in my rejection review. Why did they not get in? They applied too late. They didn't have enough experiences. They didn't know how to write about it. Oh my goodness, we're in the middle of interview season right now with our med schools, and I'm not kidding. On a daily basis when we finish, we sit down and go, oh my goodness, did you see what they were wearing? Did you see that background? Did you see how they could not even talk about anything they had done? So all of these things are integral once you get just past. So you can't just focus on that beautiful GPA and MCAT. They're going to be important and you've got to have them, but it's also all those other parts that you put together. So let's quickly go through the numbers. All right. This is what we saw last year, and this is what we've been seeing over time. And as you can see, these numbers are going up. We're continuing to see this increase. We're seeing an increase in the Mcat. We're seeing an increase in the GPA. We're seeing an increase in what we're seeing in the matriculants, all the way across the board. So last year, the average applicant MCAT was around a 506, which is actually above the 50th percentile, and the mean GPA was around a 3.6, which is really interesting because we're continuing to see that applicant GPA going up. But if you look at the matriculates, the kids who were actually accepted and went off to med school, again, what we're looking at is an average MCAT of around 511, 512, and an average GPA of around 3.7 and a science GPA of 3.6. And I get that question a lot about which is more important, the overall GPA or the science GPA. And we actually weight both of those. So we're looking for a strong overall GPA. But I will tell you, if your science GPA is significantly lower, like in the 3.4 range, then that's definitely going to have an impact. If you're looking at the numbers of applicants versus matriculants, like we said, we saw a little uptick in the applicants in terms of a downtick in the number of applicants, but a little uptick in the acceptances, and that's because we did have new schools come online and COVID sort of decreased those people who followed through. The interesting thing is, and I get people all the time who are like, I'm going to try to graduate early or whatever, and you need to understand that on the med school side, we actually prefer the older applicant. Now, I'm not talking about like grandpa. We're talking about somebody who has not only gone through college, but has maybe taken a gap year or years to step outside the academic bubble with just people who are their age and work, get a job, maybe get a different degree, look at a different path. Those are the things that are very appealing to us. And the reason is that we're looking for that seasoning, that maturity, because you're going to be treating patients and people who are not just college students. So if you're looking at overall applied versus accepted and numbers of matriculants, what we're seeing is male versus female. We have definitely seen a little bit of an uptick in the number of female applicants and female acceptances. But overall, it's interesting because at the end of med school, it's about 50-50 in terms of numbers who actually graduate. In terms of in or out of state, this is consistent year after year. We see that people apply widely and broadly. So they apply to their in-state schools, and then they apply to a lot of out-of-state schools, like 77%, but matriculation is going to be higher in-state. That has to do with tuition costs. That has for state-supported schools that are going to take more in-state applicants. For instance, the in-state schools that I work with either only take in-state students or take 75 to 80% of in-state students and only allow 20% for out-of-state. If you're looking at osteopathic, we are definitely seeing a big uptake in this numbers, because it used to be that what we're actually seeing now is that matriculates, the average MCAT score is now around almost a 504, and a lot of the programs we now have are having medians around the 508, 509 range, and then the mean GPA, as you notice, is getting much closer to that of MD programs. For those who did not know, residency programs are now open. All residency programs are now open to MD and DO applicants. So there's equal competition, and actually the number of residency placements was essentially 100% equal with MD and DO applicants last year, around 94%. If you're looking for in or out of state, we've said this historically, and we're really not seeing a change in this at all. Those folks living on the West Coast, especially California and Washington, that's going to be the preponderance of our applicants in that area, and also in the South. So the West Coast, just California and Washington, literally make up a quarter of our applicants. And in the South, it's actually going to be pushing almost a third of those applicants. If you're looking at MCAT and GPA by race and ethnicity, we are really looking at, we are needing to increase our numbers, and there will be, and this is where I always say, my students go, I don't know if I want to check underrepresented or if I want to check my ethnicity or whatever. Absolutely. Because if you look at the numbers for Hispanic Latino applicants as well as Black African American applicants, we really see that there is some trend or some acceptance for a slightly lower GPA or Mcat. So absolutely, if that is an opportunity for you. Also, oftentimes a lot of my Asian students, unfortunately, it's no longer classified as an underrepresented group, and your numbers are pretty much in line with white Caucasian applicants, international, non-U.S. citizens, non-permanent residents. We're talking about, so there's a cutoff between that because there are Canadian residents, and about 50% of schools can consider Canadian applicants as out of state, so not as international. So you really need to look at the specific schools. But in terms of international students who do not have permanent residence or green card, the MCAT tends to need to be at least 2 points above the mean for any individual school. And your GPA needs to be right at or above the average GPA for the school. Okay, that is enough of the numbers because those things tend to make me dizzy, and it's the reason I did not go into mathematics. Let's talk more about getting into med school. So we've already talked about that only 40% basically of people who apply are going to get in. And we often talk about getting into med school like moving from college athletics into the pros. And I was actually a college athlete, so I sort of get this component where you come in, and if you're a good high school athlete, there's a chance you're going to get a college acceptance to a really good school to play college athletics or even at the club level. And this is where, when we work with a lot of pre-med students who were high achievers in high school, when they applied to college, it was like at their feet. They got into multiple colleges. You just applied. You applied in October. You knew by December you were good to go. This is a year-long process, and far more people are going to get denied. And so the beginning of every year, we're in the midst of college football season, and my husband is a big Carolina fan. He went to Carolina, he played college soccer. And this year with football, there was all this talk about the quarterback for their college being a Heisman Trophy candidate. And all it takes, you cannot unmake a first impression. And all it takes is a couple of hiccups, a few interceptions, a stumble here or there, missing a deadline, not articulating something, and all of a sudden you've fallen off the radar. You have to hit your mark at every particular point and also bring to the table that awareness of who you are. So when we're talking about the timeline, it is a year-long process, and out the gate, actually it's more than a year long, it's actually a year and a half long process. And out the gate, this is where I find a tremendous number of my students making their first mistake. My students that I'm working with who are planning to apply next year, we're going to start working, well, for those who are already in the system, we've already been working before this. We've looked at the things they're missing, targeting the things they need to be working on, getting them ready. But we're going to start next month, having them putting together their list of experiences, categorizing them out, what area they're going to place them in so we can look at where they're weak, where they're strong, start to brainstorm those personal statements, because by January, I expect to have their first draft of their personal statement and their experiences coming to me so we can start looking through those. You should think about going through a minimum of 3 solid drafts of these. So oftentimes I run into people who, they'll start preparing for the MCAT, thinking about it like their freshman year. When do I need to take the MCAT? When do I need to take the MCAT? You should start thinking about putting together your application. The average student studies 6 months for the MCAT. You should put a minimum of 6 months into drafting your personal statement and your experiences. So with that in mind, the best timeline is between November and the 1st of January. You should be listing your experiences, looking at where you're lacking, putting all those together, thinking, brainstorming your personal statement so that between January and February, you can do your first draft. Around March, your second draft, April, your third and final draft. You should also start requesting letters of recommendations no later than January before you start to apply. And you're like, why? Because you need to A, know how many letters you need, B, start looking at if you guys have questions, just type them in the chat box. Thank you. I saw little hands raising up there. Let me make sure that you guys can hear me. I can't get, oops, back. See, I've lost my pointer. Pointer options. I don't want you hidden. I want an arrow. Show me that. There we go. There we go here. If you guys have questions, just type them in the chat box for me, and I will come back to them at the end of the session so I can answer you guys. Okay? Sorry. So are there no questions? You guys can still hear me? Everything good? Okay, so just type any questions that you have in the chat box and I will get back to you guys when the session is over. All right, so back to where we were talking about letters of recommendation. Why do you need to ask for them so early? I don't know at the number of times that I have people who are going to their recommenders like in late April and 1st of May. Well, remember, most faculty members are 9-month employees. They're going to peace out as soon as graduation is over, and you may be sitting, waiting, not able to get into, still virtual in a lot of instances, harder to get in touch with people. Really want to be planning ahead. You want to be looking to see if your school has a review committee that gathers your letters or if you need to be gathering them in advance. I strongly encourage you to use the letter service like Interfolio or something like that to start gathering those letters so you've got them all together when your application opens. What you want to do is when May gets here and the application's open for keying, you can start inputting your information, sending your transcripts as soon as you have your grades if you're waiting on grades, and get everything ready, because Texas and ACOMA's DO applications open for submission in May, and then AMCAS is going to open the end of May, 1st of June. Second thing that I recommend for my students, once you get your primary application done, use the prompts from prior years to start pre-writing your secondary essay responses, because AMCAS, you want to submit as early as you can because it takes 6 to 8 weeks to verify your application. We'll talk a little bit more about your MCAT and your timing of that, because ideally you want to take, if you can take your MCAT the summer, the year before you apply, bonus, because if you're good to go and you've got a great score, you can walk and forget about the MCAT. But if you need to retest, you've still got the fall and the spring to apply. If that is not an option in terms of your MCAT, I ideally like to see students take their first attempt between January and March. And the reason being is that allows you to get a score back, and it allows you time to do a retest, be it April, May, or the 1st of June. And you're like, but why so late? What, I won't have my score. Well, here's the thing. If you've got a score and you know you're going to retest and you're not sure if your score doesn't go up and you're going to maybe pull out and take time to wait, then what you can do is when the application's open, you can submit to one super reach school, a school that you would never get into. And that's okay, because all you want them to do is to start verifying your application. In May and June, no schools can see your application. Schools don't see your application until AMCAS, ACOMAS, or Texas releases to them in late June or the 1st of July. So at that point, all you're doing is getting your application completed. Then once you get that retake score, if you need to retake, you can better decide on the schools you want to apply to. So again, we want to submit your primary application as early as possible. Submit early, this is the big problem. So many people submit much later. We've already talked about that. Start pre-working on your secondaries. Then when secondaries come out in July and August, submit your secondaries as soon as possible. We say for a 2 to 3 week turnaround. I actually do presentations all through the next year, and you guys can register for these on our webinar website starting in November. But I'll do a presentation in January about your personal statement and experiences, one in April about getting ready for the rest of your application, what you need to do, the reasons why people don't get in. And then in July, we'll do one about secondaries and interview, but I'll just touch on that today. Between August and typically January, but it can go into February and March, we're going to get interviews, got all kinds of tips for that. And just so that you know, around November, December, in the year you're applying, you want to start sending out your letters of continued interest. So let's go on and talk about what goes into this actual application. Man, that's hard to say. Like I said, it is a year-long process. primary, then to secondary, then to interviews and beyond. I can't tell you the number of students that I get who go, I just want to write the personal statement that is going to get every committee's attention. I hate to tell you this, but your personal statement is probably the least important part of your application. So your GPA and your Mcat are going to get you through the screen. Okay, so the average admitting GPA is a 3.65 to a 3.75. That does not mean if you have a 3.5, you're not going to get in. It just means you're going to need to be stronger on the other parameters. The average Mcat score, about a 5.11. Now, what we generally say is that a 3.55 and a 3.9 will get most applicants through a basic screen, okay? But so here's what we're talking about. The minimum requirements, okay, are about a 3.45, ideally above, because this is your average and you're competing against 10,000 people, most who already have this. The average Mcat screening, we say, is about a 5.08, 5.09. In terms, what we say is a 5.12 generally makes most schools go, they know the content. 5.16 and above starts to really turn heads. We're also looking for clinical experience. I cannot tell you the number of applicants who come through who have maybe got like 20 hours of shadowing. We're looking to know that you tell me you want to be a doctor. Have you done anything to investigate this? And getting paid experience in terms of that clinical is always a plus, oftentimes where that gap year comes in. If your credentials are below that, and I get this every year, I get this student who's an awesome student. I think it's going to make a great applicant with like the 3.4 and maybe a GPA, an Mcat in the 5.04 range. They don't really want to apply DO this year, and they always say to me, I just really want to let the schools know that I'm interested. We got 10,000 applicants. We don't need to know you're interested. What that shows us is that you necessarily haven't really thought about this. You don't really understand the competition that you're up against. That's like the high school quarterback thinking he's going to make the pro team. There are a couple every year, but for the most part, no, it's not going to happen. If your GPA, though, starts to fall in this lower range or your Mcat is lower, you need to consider taking a gap year to bolster your application, potentially gaining a master's degree or master's level coursework, or consider your other options like Caribbean school, adding DO, etc. That's all what we talk about. Now, a strong Mcat score can help the little bit lower GPA. So if you have a 3.4, 3.5, but you get a 5.18, 5.20, that will significantly offset that GPA because that shows us that you understand the content. However, I'm going to tell you a poor Mcat kills a 4.0 every day and Sunday because there is this thought that your Mcat score is a predictor of your future board scores. Future board scores determine residency placement. Residency placement determines schools ranking. And that's what kids are always looking at. I want a top 10 school. Well, a top 10 school got there for a reason. A quick breakdown, you guys understand the basics of the area. There are 4 different areas based on the biological, physical, and chemical sciences, as well as the social behavior and a reading section. The total time of the desk takes about 6 hours and 15 minutes. With breaks, you're looking at about 8 hours. When I took it, it was 8 hours on pen and paper. It's amazing we didn't chisel it out. But, you know, you're looking at a range of anywhere between 472 and 528. And this is the scoring that we talk about. And here is where most people are. This is the average at about 500 to 502. This is where you really want to be. You want to be in this 512 and above. And so this is where we're getting in about the 80th percentile. This is in about the 92nd percentile. This is you're starting to really range into the 97th, 98th percentile. So this is truly the real upper echelon. This is why most schools say at a 512, we're generally like, okay, they understand the content. At about 516, when we're hitting that 92nd percentile, that's really starting to turn heads. These are the scoring percentiles. Y'all don't need that. Let's talk about why that 50% of people who had the good GPA in the Mcat got denied. So we said the first was you're missing the timing. You didn't take your MCAT until June or July for the first time. You didn't submit your application until July or August. You're so far behind the bow. You didn't submit your secondary essays until September and October. You're so far behind the curve. Most schools are rolling admissions. So think about it like you really want to see the new Star Wars that comes out, and you want it, you've got your money, you've got everything, and you show up 2 minutes before the movie is going to start. We're sold out, we're done. There's not a seat for you. I don't care how bad you want it. And that's the thing. We often talk about in our AdCom meetings about the very qualified student who didn't submit until August or September. They were waiting to get those MCAT results or whatever. Again, we may not consider you complete till we get those results, but we still need your application and your secondary. So as soon as those come in, if you're looking at it on the other side, we didn't get your secondary back until the end of October. Did you not care? All of these things, you cannot unmake a first impression, and that all shows it. With that in mind, I cannot tell you, so AMCAS gives you 15 experiences. I can't tell you the number of people who undervalue these experiences. Either they come to me with less than 12, and less than 12 is an automatic red flag. The first screen is going to be that GPA and MCAT. The second screen, not your personal statement, I am not looking at that. The second screen is an electronic screen of your experiences. It spits out a grid that categorizes your experiences by the categories, length of time, and number of hours. So how you present those experiences is going to be huge. Let me give you a perfect example. Shadowing. Shadowing is something important for any student to get. We've already said a minimum of 100 hours in at least 3 to 5 disciplines. I'm going to expand on that. But when you do that, I don't know at the number of people who take their shadowing and they go, shadow Dr. X in family medicine, 4 hours. Another experience, shadow OBGYN, 2 hours, shadowed a surgeon, 4 hours. So they've taken up 5 of these key experiences, and the total clinical is like 20 hours. So you lose on both sides. I always have my students group all of their shadowing together. So they're going to have a longer period of time. Maybe even if they started in high school and shadowed somebody into college, that same person, that's the only way you can count high school. But let's say you start from college into the year all the way to your gap year. Then maybe you have 5 or 6 years of shadowing, longer time, more shadowing experiences, and a greater number. You're going to get a heavier weight. This is why the 2 biggest things that I see students fall behind are not having enough clinical and not having enough service, followed shortly behind by not having enough research. When I have a student who comes to me who says, I want to, and we get this all the time because I work for 2 top 20 schools. I must get into a top 15, top 20 school. Okay, well, what have you done? I really, really want to go to Hopkins. Okay, Hopkins is a very, very research intensive school. How much research do you have? 120 hours? Not going to cut it. You've got to be realistic about what you bring to the table and your target schools. And it's not about getting into a top 15 school. It's about what you bring to each school in particular. And I still remember the dean at Duke when a student came in and said, I need to be in the top 15 school. And he said, do you need to be a doctor or do you need to be in a top 15 school? Because if you think about it, top 15 schools, 100 seats, that's only 1,500 seats, 53,000 applicants. Okay, you've got a 0.002% chance of getting into any of those seats. Be realistic about what you're targeting. So what goes into those 15 experiences? We always talk about they should be broken into 5 categories: academic, clinical, service, leadership, and social. Academic is things outside of your GPA and your MCAT. So let's talk a little bit about that. I just mentioned research before. Typically, we say research should be ideally at least a year. A semester can count. It's not going to be a huge part of your application, but ideally 2 semesters or longer. Interestingly enough, the average number of research hours last year was almost 1,400 hours. I have no idea how that was possible, except for the fact there were some people so far skewed that they skewed it that much to that side. It is not important about being published or presentations, although that helps. We are looking at exposure to either a wet lab or in a clinical research setting, ideally with patient contact, or both. Multiple settings. If you're looking at MD, PhD, you must have at least 2 years of research, ideally in 2 different labs or more. Publications obviously help, and leading your own independent research project. Research is not about discoveries on what we're looking for. We're looking to understand that you know the research process. No research is not required. However, in the 15 core competencies, and what AMCAS wants you to see is that in your 15 experiences, you've at least exhibited these core competencies somewhere in all of those. They talk about critical thinking and research experimental design. Most med schools think the only way you can get that is through research experience. Teaching and tutoring is something else. Now, again, it's not specifically that exact act. Okay, you could be a TA, a tutor, an ISS leader, whatever, or tutoring independently or privately. It is about learning how to explain complicated information in a format other people can understand. So you may train other people in a job. That's not only leadership, but that's teaching. You may train people in a research lab. You may tutor in small groups. What we're looking at is, do you have experience, and can you talk to us about ways that you've been able to take something that's very complicated and break it down in a way that the average person can understand? 9 times out of 10, this is one of the biggest flaws with physicians, because it's write a script, tell them you got this, whatever. I don't know. My grandfather had diabetes. I'm pretty sure he went to his grave thinking the sugars were just that he ate sugars, did not understand the relationship between the disease he had, his sugars, and why he was testing his blood. And we've got to be, if we want patients to take ownership of their health care, they need to be able to understand what they're doing. That's why teaching and tutoring is so important. Now, study abroad, and people often get confused about this study abroad. It's not about necessarily going abroad. It is about diversity. It is about cultural appreciation. And I will tell you, every single med school, one of our checkboxes when we're interviewing is, what diversity does this person bring to the table? Now, that may be, you may be first generation American, you may have immigrated here, you may be an international student, but there may be many other ways. Maybe you have done a study abroad, or you've lived abroad, or you've traveled extensively with your family or on your own. Or better yet, maybe just working with underserved groups. Maybe you've worked with refugee centers. Maybe you've worked with children from broken homes. You've worked with prisoners. There are so many different ways to bring diversity and cultural diversity and understanding to your application. So we often talk about people who are of Jewish descent and maybe doing their heritage trip. All of these things come into play. Now, when we're talking about, oh, by the way, in terms of that academic, being bilingual, trilingual, etc., always an asset. So even if you took high school Spanish and you haven't taken since then, get yourself Duolingo, Babbel, self-taught, start teaching yourself. A quarter of the world's population speaks Spanish, a quarter of the world's population speaks Chinese, Mandarin, dialect, and those are huge assets, as well as other different types of languages. And if you can ever translate for a person, in a student, anything to increase their experience, their comfort zone, a major plus for a med school. Now let's talk about clinical, and clinical is a must. Okay, it's not optional, it is a must. We look for diversity over single areas. I would far rather see somebody with 150 hours in 5 areas versus 400 hours in just orthopedics. And I appreciate you maybe want to be an orthopedic surgeon. Trust me, I'm not trying to be condescending. Somebody should have smacked me, because going into med school, I was going to be a plastic surgeon. I wanted to be a plastic surgeon. I was going to do burn treatment, mainly because I had worked in a burn unit for 4 years, thought I knew everything, knew nothing. But that was what I was so sure that I wanted to do. Now, had I ever actually done plastic surgery? Had I ever actually done burn treatment other than treating wounds? No. Okay, so somebody in that whole process should have smacked me, because I went in saying, I'm going to be a plastic surgeon. My first 2 years of med school, going to be a plastic surgeon. Got to my first clinical rotations. First thing I did was surgery. Never hated anything so much in my life. And then I'm kind of sitting there going, what am I going to do? So diversity of experiences, we want you to shadow in the profession. We want you to have a better understanding of what the life of a clinician is like. And I can tell you, coming out of COVID, it has sucked. Okay, but it is also very rewarding, but that we've tested the waters of what you're interested in, that you understand. And every med student I get, every pre-med student, I want to help, serve, make a difference, all of that. Okay, which is all the reasons that you should want to go into this. But medicine is so much more than that. The challenges of the life, the non-compliant patient, the belligerent patient, the losses. I mean, it's not every patient gets better. And truly understanding the paperwork, the background, managing an office, those are the things we're looking for, and those cannot be replaced. It's also why we really like paid clinical, and it can be the unpaid as long as it's the experience. So aim for a minimum of 100 hours. Again, we've had virtual shadowing hours and in person, and if you combine all that shadowing into one group, you can throw in 15 different specialties for X number of hours. That's what we're looking for. Shadow for a minimum of 3 to 5 areas. One must be primary care. Okay, paid clinical is a big plus, or volunteering in these areas, and it goes in this order: scribe, CNA or MA, and EMTB. Not that any of those are not better than the other, but the idea is in scribing, you have to go directly through the thought process, following along behind the physician. CNA gets you that patient interaction. EMTB is good, but typically they're often the people who drive the ambulance or assist. So if you're at the intermediate or paramedic level, it will hold more credence. Okay, service experiences. Again, cannot undervalue this. Probably of all my students, this is the area that is most lacking. And because healthcare is such a service-driven field, we are looking not just for basic service, but service that has taken you outside your comfort zone. The dean that I worked with at Chapel Hill was always like, oh, you volunteered in a hospital, taking blankets and coffee to the sick. Great if you want to be an airline stewardess or whatever, but we're really looking for engagement with patients, understanding the lifestyle, and getting outside your own comfort zone. I actually have a little with Big Brother, Big Sister, and I will tell you, I've learned more from my little than probably I've ever done for her. Volunteering with hospice, being with people at the end of their life and understanding the dying process. All my students are always, I need to understand the person behind the patient. And then when I go to interview prep, they're just like X, Y, and Z, and they've completely forgotten there is a person behind the patient. There is somebody who has taken off a job. There is somebody whose sibling or whatever, or sister or child had to bring them to that appointment because they no longer can get around. There's the father who's worried that his health debilitation may no longer be able to provide for his family. You have to remember that every single patient that walks through your door has a life outside of your door, just like you do, and what that entails, what that means, what it means losing somebody, what it means coming from an underprivileged background, what it means being somebody who's overcome homelessness or whatever. So we are looking for service that takes you outside your comfort zone, that is done on a regular basis, ideally for a minimum of 50 hours, for somewhere for once or twice a week. Not that annual events or blood drives or things like that are not good, but really taking yourself outside your comfort zone. Leadership is important because we expect you in the future to be able to lead staff, other physicians, your office that you're working on. So it's important that you have learned the hiccups. So what we're looking at is, in your leadership position, have you figured out how to gain the confidence of other people in your ability to lead, but also have you been able to motivate them to become part of a team? So when you're thinking about the things that you're doing, you need to be thinking about, what have I learned from this? What am I going to be able to bring to other classmates, and how's that going to help me in my application? And that's the biggest disconnect that I see with students. They've done a crap load of stuff, but they can't tell me how they've grown from it. So like service should be about how you change through the service you do. Your leadership experience should make you better. Think about it like a marriage. We always talk about that you should not be propping the other person up. You should make yourself even better with that person that you're with. All of these experiences should help to make you a better applicant, help you better understand why this career choice and where you're going to be in the future. Now, what you can't lose sight of is also the importance of outside experiences, because med school is stressful. We're going to want to know that you have an outlet, and we also want to know that you're going to be able to interact and communicate with other people. About 30% of my applicants are varsity athletes, just like I was. Or if you were involved in, oftentimes my people are like, I don't want to talk about my fraternity and sorority because that's going to be a stigma. Look, you got to live with other people who are like or different from you. You've got to lead people who are in your sorority or your fraternity. These can be very, very good things for what you're doing. Expand your network, your support system, and I'm always looking for unique things that you do. I'm always astounded by the number of instruments my students play or the painters that they are. My son actually does wire twisting and creates some of the most unbelievable sculptures, and he carves all kinds of things out of wood. When my son's a medical resident now, an ER resident, and he said when he went for his ER residency interviews, they wanted to talk more about his carving and his craft work, which was really interesting. Briefly, I'm going to touch on your personal statement from those experiences. Now that we should be brainstorming those for the next application, please avoid the common mistakes. Your personal statement should be 5 to 6 paragraphs. It's got to have a catch. Okay, it's got to have something that catches my attention so that I want to think about it as like a movie trailer that makes you want to watch something. And then it needs to craft your story, not somebody else's story. I don't know how many times I read, I was inspired by my dad. Okay, great. Your dad was a physician. Tell me more about you. My grandmother died, and I want to make sure that that doesn't happen to future people. Wonderful aspiration, but what have you done? What makes you unique? What service things, what research things, what unique experiences you've had. Please avoid the cliches that everybody says. I want to help, serve, make people better. I love science. I want to be a doctor. We know you want to be a doctor. You're applying. Again, I'll have a whole series on that in January. What makes a good secondary application? You need to know that almost all schools, about 90%, automatically send secondaries. Never even look at your application. Just go, oh, look, John Doe applied, send him a secondary. If you read the fine print, it will say, if you don't meet our qualifications, we will not look at your secondary. I can tell you this is true. 2 schools that I work for did not even open more than 60% of their secondaries last year because they did not meet their qualifications. Start preparing ahead by pre-writing the core essays during your lax time in between May and June so that you're ready, because you need to turn those secondaries down ideally within 2 to 3 weeks after receiving them. Interviews, oh, we are in the heart of those now. And in virtual interviews, I can't even begin to explain to you. From the way you dress to the setting of your interview is so, so important. So make sure that you're thinking about all of these aspects, okay? So you want to think about how am I dressed, okay? The typical biggest mistake I get, dark suit, white shirt, plain black and red tie, or the girl in the black jacket, white collared shirt, collars going all over the place. You all look like a bunch of penguins. You want to be unique and memorable. And when I've been doing my preps, I'm amazed at the number of people. And when we've been doing our interviews, and we'll get off the interview prep and go, they were in their bedroom. There was a beer poster. Did you notice he had a bong in the background? All of the things that go into, you cannot unmake a first impression. So you need to be prepared. We've got a whole list of things, but in your interviews, like I said, can't unmake a first impression. Act professional. Look professional. Your interview starts the minute that Zoom interview comes on, or the minute you walk through the door. Your ability to dress, present, eye contact, tone, and inflection of voice will mean everything. And how you answer your questions, I'm going to tell you the 3 most common mistakes between the And the number one mistake of millennials, cannot start an answer without going, and I'll go, if there was only one spot left in our class, why would we give it to you? So I don't know what it is about the new generation, but not starting a statement with so. One thing to really look at: read your application, reread your secondaries, research your school, know what you're doing. Gap years, cannot underemphasize this enough. We like the older applicant. If the average age is 24 to 25, that means there have been some gap years in there. We typically say that we want to see people apply before the age of 40. About a third of my applicants are in their 30s. So the taking up a gap year, 2 gap years, 3 gap years is not only encouraged, it is highly looked upon by med schools to get you the most well-rounded, well-targeted application, because I'm going to tell you, reapplication is not fun. It's a tighter screen, there are fewer slots, and about 45% of schools now are going to, we will not interview you the first year after you've been denied. That is why it is so incredibly important to have everything together. Now, I have talked a lot, and I want to leave some time for you guys to talk about other information. So what I want to do is I want to go and ask if any of you guys would like any more information about any of our programs, like how to prepare for the Mcat, how to navigate the medical admissions process, or boosting your GPA. So if you're interested in any of that, just let me know, and I'll have somebody reach out to you guys. Basically, so that you know, and I think it will allow me. Oh, nope. Got it. Don't want that. Nope. Do not know what's going on there. But why is it texting me? Stop it. Maybe. I'm going to end the show and try to bring it back. Never had that happen. My apologies. Let me launch this again. There we go. Go away. There we go. Much better. Okay. We can help you on all perspectives. Okay. We can help you with homework help. We can, with our homework help, if you're struggling in any class, we can help you get that MCAT score. That's also important. And we can help you with admissions counseling. And that's the biggest thing. I mean, so many folks don't realize that it's so much more than this, and putting that application together and how you do that. And we have all kinds. We can do just your primary application. We can do your secondary if you've already done your primary. We can do start to finish, which is really what you need. And we have our Premier Comprehensive, which is actually working directly with me, full on start to finish. Now, with that said, I want to take our time to see if I can answer any questions. And do I have any questions out there? I don't see any in the chat. Let's see if I can get the questions. Maybe I'll close the poll. Sorry, I'm having a delay in getting them to open. Questions? Why are you not working? Well, shoot. Here we go. There they are. Finally. It ain't speedy. All right. Is this session recorded? Yes, it is. And if you enrolled in this to come to see this, you're going to get it back. Is it possible to have our contact information for additional questions in the future? This is what I wanted to let you guys know. If you go to the TPR Medical Admissions Counseling website, there is actually a place where you can take a quiz, and you can get linked up with one of my enrollment advisors, and his name is Matt, and he can pass along any specific questions that you guys have, and I would love to help you guys with those. So are you suggesting putting all the clinical experiences together? Like if I shadowed 2 doctors, put it in one timeline all together? Absolutely. That is exactly what I'm saying. We want you to group. So the first thing is you want to list all of your experiences. And here's my first tip. If you got less than 12, without grouping all of your shadowing together, you probably don't have enough. 12 is kind of like our cutoff. Okay, so you want to go ahead now, list out all your experiences, list out the categories. So look at how many research you have, how many service you have, how many medical you have. And I do recommend putting all of your shadowing together so that you have a longer period of time and more experiences. Can I be a TA for a class count as leadership? Yes, being a TA for a class counts as teaching and tutoring and counts as leadership if you're not just doing grading, but if you're like running sessions, etc. Generally, we want at least 2 leadership positions. They don't have to be specific titles like president or whatever, but roles in which you actually took a lead role. Will these slides get sent to the attendees? Yes, you will get the whole recorded session that will have the attendance information. Is it important to know what specialty you want to go into? Actually, we prefer you not. And even if you think you know what you want to go into and they ask you that question, you should always start it with, my current interest is in pediatrics based on my experience. So for like me, I would have been a whole lot smarter to have written, having worked in a burn unit for 4 years, I currently have a strong interest in potentially pursuing plastic surgery and burn treatment. However, I realize that this is what medical school is for, and my clinical rotations will far help me determine that, but I would like to do X, Y, and Z. We far prefer the applicant who is not like steadfastly, this is what I want to do, because truthfully, you shouldn't really know. If I've shadowed virtually for about 30 hours and shadowed about 10 to 15 hours in person, the references will be from 2 different people. Who would I need to pick one? If you're talking about who you list, so when you list your experiences and they list the contact person, you have 2 different ways that you could play this. So that would be perfect. Here's a perfect example. You've got roughly 45 hours of shadowing in X number of categories over a period of time. And then they list a contact person. First of all, let me tell you, we at AMCAS has never contacted anybody unless your hours are so far-fetched. Like I had a girl the other year who wanted to list 400 plus hours for everything she did. Like she worked day and night, and that just didn't work. And so you've got to be realistic in it. Otherwise, I'm going to tell you an admissions committee will nail you and we can sniff it out. But with that said, we say either put the contact name of the person that you shadowed the most. So like you said, you've got one person in person for 15 hours. That might be who you want to put. Or you can put your academic advisor or somebody like that. We're looking for somebody who could speak to the authenticity of that. I also mentioned that AdComs don't interview applicants the first year after being denied. So does that mean reapplicants should not reapply? Okay, that's not all of them. So we're talking about the first year after you've been denied. Here's the big thing. There are 2 parts about being a reapplicant. Number 1, you should have fixed all the reasons you did not get in before reapplying. So for instance, let's say you had a 3.45 GPA, you knew it was too low, you tried it anyway, you didn't get in, you didn't do a master's, and you're going to start one. We don't want you to reapply and go, I'm starting a master's in the fall. We expect you to fix that and do at least 1 year of master's level coursework before applying. Then maybe it's, I didn't have enough clinical, I didn't have enough service, I didn't have research. You need to have fixed that before reapplying. However, due to the number of applicants and because so many schools are getting so many applications, there has been a predilection, and there are a lot of schools, especially on the West Coast and the Northeast, who actually say if you have applied, when they look at it and it's an immediate reapplication, they will not interview that student. And we don't know what schools they are. I learned them incidentally as people sort of talk to me, but you just need to make sure that you have the best application possible because the competition is so fierce, it's expensive, and you want to create that first impression that shows you knew what you were doing. Would you be able to count hospice volunteering as clinical and volunteering experience? And yes, that's actually a very good question. Oh, hi, Walker. Yes, actually you can, Walker. Hospice volunteering can actually fall into both categories. Now you're going to have to there are two ways to split this. Your hospice can be a volunteering, a service thing, which is going to be great. And that's what you list in it, and you reference it in terms of speaking to the clinical experience you got in the discussion part in your experiences. However, you can also count a portion of those hours if you have any clinical aspect of it in sort of geriatric care, that type of shadowing, if you're doing it like in a center. So you can also count a portion of those hours. It's the same thing with hospital volunteering. Hospital volunteering, if you volunteer for 300 hours in a hospital and you're doing sort of patient work, assisting patients, but you observe physicians on different floors, we can count a portion of those hours in terms of the floors that you volunteered in. So there's a way to split them. Remember, they're not following you around, so it's all in how we craft and list those. How are virtual shadowing experiences viewed? Virtual shadowing, especially here post-COVID, are a realistic aspect. We expect a balance. We don't want all of your hours to be virtual. And I can tell you exactly what every committee is saying. People can and have gotten in-person shadowing, shadowing in free clinics, etc. So there should be at least a balance, okay? You can have all in person or you can have a split, but not all virtual. But we do understand there can be virtual hours because of COVID, but again, grouping them together. If they're all virtual, I will tell you every single committee I sit on said then they should have waited to apply. How would the pass fail step one change affect schools we should apply to? Really shouldn't change or impact, because there's still going to be you have to pass step one. We're a little nervous that's going to put more weight on the step two scores, although most people tend to do a little better on step two because it's more applied information. We don't think at the end of the day it's going to have a huge impact. From where can I get this session's recording? Okay, if you registered for this session, the recording will be sent to you by email afterwards. Also, I will put it in our archives on our webinar website. So if you go to the Princeton Review webinars, at the very bottom, you can pull up the webinars. This one will not be up for about probably 4 to 5 days because I have to process the recording. How for are many hours of virtual shadowing considered as an experience? They are considered as an experience, but just like I talked about, there has to be a balance of some impersonal component. I have a lot of paid clinical experience, but not a lot of shadowing hours. What would you say is the minimum number of hours for shadowing only? Abigail, if you're still online and I get down to it, if you can tell me what that paid clinical was in, because it depends on what the paid clinical is. So if it's like as a CNA or as an EMT or as a scribe or something like that, and you've been in different types of areas, that's really going to offset that. Then we're going to look for shadowing more for diversity, other areas. So at least 3 to 4 different areas. And then probably you need to hit at least 50 hours. So you'd rather have people have shadowing 5 different professors for 140 hours than just one doctor for 200 every day and Sunday. And I will tell you, it's about understanding different areas, diversity, etc. Does having a GED look bad? Dropped out of school because of a long story related to depression, not feeling smart, ended up graduating from college summa cum laude, dual biology and chemistry degrees, and a math minor. Actually, having a GED will not impact us at all. At all, zero, nada. Actually, overcoming things, overcoming hurdles, that's going to help you be more empathetic to other patients. It's going to help you understand other people's journey. I often get people who will say to me, I overcame an addiction, I overcame such and such. We expect you to be human, all right? It's overcoming those things and being relatable. I don't know how many students I have who have ADHD who don't want to disclose it. Why? Do you not think you're human? That's not going to impact us at all. What we're looking at are repeated offenses that you didn't learn from. If you've had 3 DUIs or you've had 4 or 5 student conduct things, that's what we're looking at where you didn't learn from it. But 1 or 2 never hurt anybody. And that the GED, if you graduated, did well, not going to worry about it. I'm currently working on my master's, but I anticipated graduation in May 2023. Should I still start my application next May? Okay, if you're working on your master's and you have at least 2 semesters of credit, so like one from this semester, one in the spring, it doesn't matter if it's a 1 or a 2-year master's. If it's a 1 year, you must do the full year, and then you can then start maybe doing a paid clinical job, whatever, during your application year. If it's 2 years, it is perfectly fine to do the 1 year and then plan to apply during the 2nd year. No problem with that. Anticipated. Did I get through all questions? Yes, awesome. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for all of your questions, all your information. I'll get this webinar out to you guys in the next couple of days. It will be sent to you directly. And if you have any other questions, you can go to questions@review.com. But those tend to be answered by our field people, not directly by me. So I would recommend that you go to our website and take that quiz and then schedule a time to talk to Matt, and Matt can send me all of your additional questions. We also have a free app that helps you categorize all of your experiences. It's like a portfolio. So go to our site, take the quiz, get ready, get going, don't wait. Hope to work with some of you guys. I would love to work with you. Everybody have a great day.